Because the idea really is, we have a threat in space, how can we get after it really quickly within 24 hours rapidly so that we can deter and win against threats that happen in space. So that was the idea there. We showed that with Victus Nox. That was through Firefly and Alpha launch vehicle, Millennium Space Systems with their space vehicle. We showed how we could do that really rapidly. So how could we look into the future, not just like the next 5 years, which SPACEWERX is mostly focused on, to really have those next generation of space warfighting capabilities ready to go.
Welcome to Austinpreneur, our show about the stories that made Austin, Texas a global hub for startups. The show is produced by Capital Factory and hosted by me, Nick Spiller. As a reminder, by joining Capital Factory, you can plug into the ecosystem where the stories on this show were set. Learn more about us at capitalfactory.com. Welcome back, everyone, to the Austinpreneur podcast, where we discuss innovation, technology, venture capital here in Austin, Texas. We're a very special guest today. I'll introduce him. We have a really incredible audience as well. And we're going to be talking about SPACEWERX, the emerging commercial space economy, and the partnerships that our companies have with the Space Force and that whole domain. So very excited to introduce Arthur Grijalva, the director of SPACEWERX. He oversees strategy and execution of $460 million annually across Space Force innovation programs. We'll dive into some of those today. His focus is to expand defense industrial base, empower a Guardian talent, and accelerate technology transition to operational capability. He's a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy. He also is a master's in industrial engineering from New Mexico State University and a few other educational opportunities. He's held roles as an analyst, project manager, deputy test program manager, and deputy director before becoming the director of SPACEWERX. So join me in welcoming Arthur to the Austinpreneur podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love that intro music. It really gets you in the mood here.
Gets you pumped.
Yeah, it gets you really pumped up.
Sometimes I just listen to it by myself.
I bet, yeah. I'll have to take it home.
It's fun. Yeah, and y'all, if you don't already, and those in the audience, you can listen to a lot of conversations like this one on the podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get that. We're going to touch on a few of those. We've actually, I mean, I don't know a podcast that's covered the developments in the space, the lunar economy better than ours. Kind of by coincidence, but we'll dive into that. But Arthur, first let's just start with the basics. Will you introduce us to SPACEWERX and the mission you and your team are focused on?
Yeah, absolutely. So we touched a little bit in the beginning here, but it's really about expanding the industrial base. And why is that important? That's really so that we can have more effective systems, we can increase lethality, and then we can also really get it at a lower cost for our really big mission that we have with the Space Force. So that's what we're all about, and I really think we get that from our greatest strength as a nation, which is innovation, and you really get that from startups, small businesses, non-traditionals. So that's what we're focused on at SPACEWERX. So we do that for the Space Force. It's really all about getting those ideas that you get from all these great companies and academia, and even from the private capital side, bringing that all together to really advance those ideas. So the idea is that we pick those with the Space Force, we go against those priorities, and then we take the best and brightest ideas, invest more into them, mature them, really take advantage of the flywheel of the commercial market, and then ultimately get that into the hands of the warfighter by transitioning it to big programs of record, making sure it gets into operations and into these important missions for the Space Force.
Very, very interesting. So what originally inspired you to get into space and this career you have?
Yeah, so I actually used to be wearing the uniform. I graduated from the Air Force Academy, joined into the Air Force, and my first job was actually with what was now the Space Force. Back in the day with what's now Space Systems Command, I started there, and that was really fun. I really enjoyed it. working on hypersonics and satellite communications and how can we make that better. It was a really fun start to the career. Yeah.
Excellent. And so Space Force spun out and became its own
Yes. Yep.
service from that command. Excellent. And then when you say expanding the industrial base, how do you measure that?
Yeah. So really, what we're looking at is with these companies, there's so many amazing ideas out there. How do we align that to the priorities of Space Force? So that's by SPACEWERX partnering with the program offices, so the big programs of record, really the larger funding that comes from the Space Force. So we give about $500 million a year, which is sizable, but really what we want to do is we want to add that $40 billion a year that's coming from the Space Force. And then on top of that, maybe from other agencies, maybe sister services. I think even better is adding that private capital side to really take advantage of that really huge commercial market, which is over $1 trillion a year for an entire world for space. So that's really how we aim to do that. And we're really looking for how can we mature, how can we bring down risk, and how can we really scale these great things coming, like technologies and capabilities coming from these companies.
Yeah. It feels like the investor community is really stepping up. I mean, I think it's been happening for a little bit, but just this year alone, in our portfolio at Capital Factory, we've had 3 space IPOs.
Yeah.
Firefly Aerospace being the latest and very exciting opportunity. Why is that important for the private sector to get involved versus just government running this like maybe traditionally we have?
I think it has been a big cultural shift, especially for the Space Force, is how can we tap in to one of our strengths as a nation is the commercial market. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't still work with big primes. I think that's still an important part of the ecosystem. But I do think that there's a lot of room to be able to bring in all these great ideas, maybe by teaming with the primes, maybe becoming their own primes, becoming like these big programs or teaming with others to deliver. And that's something I really saw, especially in my years working for the Space Force, even before taking this job.
Yeah. So what are some of the wins you've had at SpaceWERX that you get excited about?
Oh, the one I really like to highlight is K2 Space. So K2 Space started with us at really a few years ago, even before I was even on the team, with an idea in a garage. Like, hey, we'd really like to have like these big mega satellites. We'd like to create a production line. And it started from an idea, which for us would be a phase 1 study, where we did a study with them. They were able to raise capital. And then we did phase 2 studies with them, which are like, not phase 2 studies, I'm sorry, phase 2 prototypes, where we would put $2 million increments of funding on. And then they were able to raise additional funding. And then eventually they did our bigger things like TACT-FIs and STRAT-FIs. So STRAT-FI is really a strategic funding increase. That's really a deep partnership between SpaceWERX, which is the Space Force, with the program offices and private capital. Typically, those programs are $60 million a year or more, and that's really, that partnership is key. And with that, specifically K2 Space, the plan is that they're going to be launching next year, launching into low Earth orbit, this mega satellite that's going to be over 100 feet wingspan, and it's able to carry 1,200 kilograms of payloads. And the big thing there is, instead of it costing $150 million a year for the Space Force, it'd be like $50 million a year for each one of these satellites. So that's kind of the idea, is unlocking those kinds of opportunities for the Space Force and bringing in more and more companies like that, which is what we're doing piece by piece throughout the Space Force.
So the phase 1, phase 2 you mentioned, that's through the SBIR program?
Yes, that is the SBIR program. That's correct.
And that's really, often the entry point through SpaceWERX, a lot of the other DICE organizations.
Yes.
And then it moves to the TACT-FI and STRAT-FI. So what's the key there? One of the themes on the show is historically there's the crossing the seed chasm, all right? And it's really hard to go from seed. For every 10 companies that raise a seed round, there's one company that raises a Series A. Now you have the SBIR chasm.
Yeah.
Right? And so we're trying to figure out who's going to cross the chasm, get to TACT-FI, STRAT-FI, and then even further down the road we can touch on. But is there anything you've noticed that really is a common denominator amongst the companies that get to the TACT-FI, STRAT-FI level?
I think it's really hearing that demand signal, which is what we really are for at SpaceWERX. We're the idea is that SpaceWERX, that these contracts are awarded, that's a demand signal. And as that demand signal grows, that's how other companies could also align, because that's really where the Space Force is going. Because all these contracts that we put in place, they all are tied to priorities for the Space Force, and they're tied to specific program offices looking for more opportunities to bring in non-traditionals and other companies into the portfolio.
Yeah. So there's, by demand signal, you mean other partners within the Space Force or within the department,
Yes,
that say they want this.
it's all about teaming.
Right.
It's the teaming between SpaceWERX and these other parts of the Space Force,
Right.
teaming with the companies, teaming in private capital.
Right.
Yeah.
And what is SpaceWERX' role in that? Say, the company and the private capital, the internal partner that's in the Space Force. What role are you playing beyond just writing a check and getting some money at the door, which is great, usually enough to get friends and everything. But yeah, what else does SpaceWERX do?
There are a lot of things that we also provide aside from just funding and demand signal. One of them is TRL Bootcamp, or Technology Readiness Level Bootcamp. And this is a partnership that we have with Aerospace Corporation. We're really, for these companies, we give them that resource so that they can use the lab equipment that they have at Aerospace Corporation, also the subject matter expertise. And really, we're looking to expand that program, so it's not just Aerospace Corporation, but Air Force Research Lab, NASA facilities, like JPL, all these different facilities and national resources that we have as a country. We want to provide that to companies as well. Yeah. And then another thing that we do is we build cohorts of companies. So like one example is Tactically Responsive Space. So Tactically Responsive Space, we awarded contracts. I think for that one it was about 17 companies, $34 million from SpaceWERX. That created this cohort of companies. And then those companies receive resources. So they go through our accelerator, which is Innovate to Accelerate. They're provided resources, more connections. We have events. The idea is really like bringing the ecosystem together and giving some of that support, especially for companies. It's a little scary and daunting to work with the government. The idea here is that SpaceWERX is trying to make that better so that we can bring more of these great companies in.
And that's for companies already on a SBIR or one of the programs?
Yes, that would be for companies that have received a contract, but we do have lots of events on our website. It's called spacewerx.us, where we post these events like challenges and velocity events and industry days.
Yeah, I've noticed also on social media is a great place to follow and keep up. And I like a lot of your Instagram posts.
So great. Yeah,
thank you. So,
great, it's not just me.
That's right. There's crew. Well, let's talk about the horizon for SpaceWERX. Speaking of your website, I was on there. I noticed you have a few challenges coming up: adaptive intelligent space, manufacturing, resilient military, satellite communications. Let's dive into those a little bit. What are you looking for? What kind of companies should be reaching out for any of those you want to touch on?
Yeah, sure. One that we did recently, the first one you highlighted was autonomous intelligent space, which is a little challenge. Is like, what does that really mean? What it really means is space warfighting. So how can we look into the future, not just like the next 5 years, which SpaceWERX is mostly focused on, but right over that horizon, over the 5 years, what things could we team with academia, research institutions, and industry to really have those next generation of space warfighting capabilities ready to go? So for that challenge, we did that with Space Futures Command, what will be Space Futures Command, which is currently the Space Futures Task Force. We also had Space Systems Command there, Air Force Research Lab was there, Defense Innovation Unit was there, DIU. And like bringing all these folks together with academia and industry to be able to go after that future architecture. So we want to make sure that we're still seeding the future, even though we're very focused on the next 2 to 5 years to deliver capabilities into the hands of the warfighter.
Manufacturing, something we're talking a lot about. Where's your focus in that challenge?
Yeah, so for manufacturing, what I hear a lot from industry, even from like the big primes, and also from our Space Force customers, is like, hey, there are these long poles in the tent that we really need help from a supply chain perspective, where we can have more companies and suppliers for those specific components, and make it so much better when we're trying to build satellites. So instead of it taking 2 to 3 years, you already kind of have it because we have more suppliers for those very important long poles in the tent for satellite building. So that's the idea there, and that's something that we're focused on.
Nice. So switching gears, here in Texas, we've created something called the Texas Space Commission.
Yeehaw,
I think you know also, I think about $500 million and
Yes.
budget. It should be more, hopefully will be more. Yeah, how have you, if at all, collaborated with the Texas Space Commission, and what's that relationship like?
Yeah, so we've been collaborating with the Texas Space Commission since the beginning. I've had multiple engagements with them, and we're actually doing a partnership specifically with the STRAT-FI, so strategic funding increases.
Okay.
The idea there is that we're really trying to make it as seamless as possible for Texas to put additional funding on top of companies that already have STRAT-FIs, so that companies don't have to go through all these different processes of all these different government entities. Instead, we could have that synergy with Texas to be able to get after these things and scale them really quickly. So that's the idea there. We actually even provided language that was voted on here in Texas, and it's actually part of the process now to make it easier.
And is it TACT-FI and STRAT-FI where there's the private investor match as well, or where does that come in?
So I think it was mostly focused on STRAT-FIs, but I imagine we could use it for TACT-FIs as well. For the Texas Space Commission, we would treat it as private capital when we're looking at matching dollars, not as the government. But I think the idea is really, how can we make it seamless so that additional funding can go on top and we can make it as easy as possible for companies. That's really like a lot of what we're trying to do, is like, how can we have that synergy with Texas, with other states, across the federal government, with private capital? How can we all team together to have this coalition that willing to really bring it together and have that synergy?
Absolutely. And I think on the Texas side, is we're hoping to do as much of this in Texas as we can.
Yeah,
So
love me some Texas.
And we had Norman Garza on the podcast as well, and had a fun conversation with him. It's really interesting. And I think a bunch of our guests have received funding from the commission as well. So that's another funding opportunity for space entrepreneurs, particularly ones looking to come to Texas. And we're going to open it up to questions from the audience here shortly, but I did want to bring out one of my favorite patches here, the Victus Knox patch, given to me by Jason Kim of Firefly Aerospace when he came on the show. I think you have the same patch you mentioned.
I do, yeah. It's a really cool patch.
Yeah. Tell us about the Victus Knox mission and why it was important.
Yeah, so Victus Knox is actually part of Tactically Responsive Space, or Space Safari. And that actually, that used to be in my portfolio. So I got to actually be at the launch pad when that happened. I was there nursing the satellite, watching it when it was getting mated, and kind of babysitting it a little bit on that day. And I got to actually see the launch from the launch facility. And that was really cool. Like, such a great thing. Because the idea really is, we have a threat in space. How could we get after it really quickly within 24 hours rapidly, so that we can deter and win against threats that happen in space? So that was the idea there. We showed that with Victus Knox. That was through Firefly and Alpha Launch Vehicle, Millennium Space Systems with their space vehicle. We showed how we could do that really rapidly. And now actually the maturation of that is going to be the Victus Haze mission, which SPACEWERX is actually a part of. So SPACEWERX has a STRAT-FI with True Anomaly. That STRAT-FI is to be able to launch do the same thing. We're launching really quickly up into space within 24 hours. DIU is part of that as well. So they're going to be doing that from the Rocket Lab side of the house. So those two commercial entities are going to go up, show how we can do this mission with more companies and more vendors. And really the idea there is to show the commercial might of the nation. So really excited about that. And actually, I think Firefly is going to be launching the True Anomaly one as well. So
good.
That's cool.
It's really amazing. So you take I think it was a Texas-based company, and where is the satellite company based?
So True Anomaly is based out of Colorado.
In Colorado.
Yeah.
And they had 24 hours notice. They
Yep.
made it to Vandenberg Air Force Base, Space Force Base. It's one of
I think it's a Space Force base now. Yeah.
Made it to Vandenberg, launched under 24 hours, which you don't even need to compare that to anything to make it sound interesting. But before that, what was the standard, and how long might you expect to get a satellite?
It'd be like a year, or longer. Yeah, good luck.
pretty big acceleration.
Yes.
Pretty
So
big
that was a huge
acceleration.
win for the Victus Knox mission. It was Millennium Space Systems and Firefly showing that.
Yeah.
And it was such a great win.
Yep. And a lot of the world learned about Firefly when they stuck the landing on the moon, the lunar surface, and got a great picture and video of it happening. But yeah, a lot of people don't know about the Victus Knox mission, so I recommend you go check that out. It's pretty interesting, pretty fun.
Yeah, love it.
Who has a question for Arthur? Right here.
Arthur, thank you so much for your talk and basically giving us all these experiences that you have during these years of activities and how you are looking to get small businesses and startups to actually get in contact with you and with the government and in the future with venture capital and private capital. So my question would be, sometimes with the Air Force, and I suppose that with Space Force is the same, you always look for dual use applications. So my question would be, aside from satellites, what would be your forecast of the space market in, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years, and how you are working towards making this possible? We understand that, for example, there's a lot of engineering around re-entry vehicles and materials, and that doesn't have that much to do with satellites per se, but what's this going forward? That would be my question.
Oh, there's so much of that. And I guess just to emphasize on the dual use aspect, I like to break down commercial into maybe 2 use cases. Where the C, there's like the C is big and small. So in the small case, it'd be dual use could still be private capital going into a very military focused mission. I would still consider that as a dual use commercial capability. The bigger C would be actually leveraging other aspects of the commercial market, like you would see from like GPS. That'd be a perfect example of how you can dual use the max. To your question on like different aspects of what we're going after, re-entry has actually been one of them that we've worked on. We also, I see Orbit Fab here, so that that could even be from refueling. We've also worked on even like in space servicing, assembly, manufacturing in general, where you maybe can grab another satellite and throw into a graveyard orbit. But when you're asking about what are we looking at in the future, I think really there's going to be, instead of just looking at what I get excited about with launch and space vehicles, a key part of this is going to be the ground as well. So how can you actually orchestrate these proliferated architectures? How do you command and control them? How do you tip and cue all the different sensors? How do you orchestrate all the different effectors? There's a lot there that we absolutely need help with for the Space Force. And I think that's going to really be a big growth area for the Space Force, aside from just hardware, the things you might traditionally think of with space. Because space is really, I would say, all-encompassing, but that's going to probably be an area where we're going to need a lot of help. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Sam Emeritus, Astroport Space Technologies. So following the question here about what's the future, you kind of went to the ground.
Yeah.
Other one the other way. When do you think you'll be into cislunar space and even into lunar surface stuff applications?
So we have actually been asked to look at lunar, and we're looking for opportunities right now where we can take advantage of what some of the commercial markets are even doing, and maybe have some payloads on there, or maybe even sponsor a mission. So that is something that we're currently exploring, but we don't have a firm plan yet from SPACEWERX. But that is something that we've been asked to explore and that we are currently exploring. It is coming. I know there's already some great work happening with Air Force Research Lab on that, but SpaceWorks has also been asked to look at that and bring some more of the commercial market for that to kind of supercharge that area.
Conversation is being had.
Yeah.
Daniel, and then we'll go to the back end.
Thanks. Yeah, Daniel Faber from Orbit Fab. Thanks for the shout out. Golden Dome is now a huge thing. How is that going to affect the direction and the priorities of SpaceWorks, and how does that demand signals and changes work their way into what SpaceWorks is looking at?
So I can't really speak to Golden Dome. That is something I'd reference to the Office of Secretary of Defense and their public affairs for that. What I will say is that we are currently doing an effort for space-based interceptors for missile defense. And that's something that we're teaming with for the Space Force and Space Systems Command to go after that, where we've allocated $30 million to create a cohort of companies to become players and suppliers or potentially primes for space-based interceptors for missile defense, which, I can't really tie that to Golden Dome, but that could be an aspect potentially.
Hi, Arthur. My name is Eki. I'm the CEO of Direct Kinetic Solutions. It's a two-part question. The first is, do you have any relationship with NASA? And the second one, if a company has completed an SBIR phase 1 or 2 with NASA, does that help in any way, shape, or form to jump into the SpaceWERX program?
Absolutely, yeah. So we do partner with NASA. I imagine there'll be partnerships with NASA for like the lunar question. We have partnered with NASA when it comes to in-space assembly and manufacturing. We always look to partner with NASA. In fact, we're closely tied there with Jet Propulsion Laboratory up in Pasadena in the LA area, where most of my team is as well. So we're always looking for opportunities. I think when it comes to NASA SBIRs, we could completely use that as well. So if you did receive a SBIR from any part of the portfolio, we could use that as a TACT-FI or STRAT-FI within Space Force and tie to a Space Force mission. We could also always partner with NASA and combine resources and funding to go after that, which I'm always for. I think there's only limited resources. The more we can combine forces, the better.
Oscar from Little Place Labs. So first of all, thank you. Us as a company, 3.5 years old, has been supported by various awards. Most recently, company development TACT-FI. So thank you for your guys' work. We build edge computing capability on space. So the reason of doing that is to eliminate unnecessary downlink, to give the warfighters better insights, quicker insights, get to the answer quicker, and also some of the tipping queue elements that we talk about. So two-part question. One is, when you think about edge compute, right, putting computers and putting software in space without processing, what are the areas that excite you the most, kind of looking forward? And then the second bit is, as much as we have been supported and the technology has been fostered by, awards by SpaceWERX, our capability can be used in other areas outside of Space Force within the DoD. So just want to understand what kind of support mechanism we can leverage so that we can showcase, with this conduit, with this kind of traction to, let the others within the DoD see what we can do. So two-part question. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so for the edge computing side specifically, we are going to have AI ML challenge for space operations. That's going to be coming up here this fall with SpaceWERX, where we're teaming with Space Systems Command, really with multiple program executive offices to tie that need with those program offices. So what we're hearing from all the the deltas, all the operators is how can we operate these proliferated architectures efficiently without needing lots of guardians or operators to be able to do that. And I think one aspect of that could be edge computing and leveraging that as part of that orchestration or command control, or just having tools in general to be able to leverage that. So that is something that we're kicking off this fall. We've allocated a good bit of funding for it. I don't remember off the top of my head, but we have multiple Space Force customers as part of that to kick that off. And I know there's been a lot of interest for that. So I imagine it's going to be pretty big. And that's going to be really just the start for that. On your other question of how can we, I think your question was basically hey, if we do something in SpaceWERX, how can we use that to kind of work with other entities and to kind of showcase it? We do that all the time. So for example, right now we're working with INDOPACOM. They're the combatant command that's in charge of the area responsibility in the Pacific. We're participating in an exercise with them. It's called Northern Edge, where we have 2 alternative position navigation and timing companies that are part of that exercise, and the operators are actually getting to use those companies in real exercise operations so that they could be exposed to it, learn from it, and then further advocate for it, and it kind of showcases that to the community. Another way we do that is even with these STRAT-FIs or TACT-FIs, a lot of the times there's a lot of teaming across everywhere, right? So sometimes we do get NASA. Sometimes we we do a lot of these with DIU, Defense Innovation Unit. They team with us a lot of times with a lot of these efforts. So the idea is that we're always trying to bring in more players, and even the Texas Space Commission, right? So I think just by working with SPACEWERX, it can help. Really, the idea is like, I want the companies to be successful. If the companies aren't successful, then like that makes me sad inside, right? I want to have the best ideas really come out, and if it can really have a game-changing effect in a wartime, that's what I want. That's what like gets me up every morning. It's like, how can I have a real impact if we get into a conflict? So the more we can provide tools to make that successful, the more that we can bring other players in so that we're not the only funding source. That's really what, that's what gets me up every morning. Yeah.
Excellent.
Hi, Arthur. Bobby Gallagher at Fluval Energy.
Yeah.
SPACEWERX has emphasized the rapid transition from technologies using dual use. There's a massive proliferation of deployable fission power technology, similar to our Unity nuclear battery. How does that fit in with SPACEWERX roadmap, whether it be ground-based power for ground-based sensors or in space or cislunar?
I could definitely see that as an application when we're looking at not Earth-centric orbits, right? Kind of like cislunar or going lunar. So I know the Space Force is starting to think of it, right? Because I've even been asked to look at it, and sometimes we're really looking further into the future than maybe other programs are. So I really do think that's the future of the Space Force, is how can we maybe get to these other orbits, maybe get to lunar, maybe even get Guardians in space. Like, these are the kinds of things that I think are starting to come up as ideas that we might be able to help supercharge. Specifically in the lunar mission, I could see the fission technology being a key player in that as well.
If you could teleport to any planet in our solar system, where'd you go?
Well, I think I'd rather have that teleportation ability within Earth.
Within Earth? No,
Yeah.
not an option.
No, I love Earth. I love all
You
the
could
little
just
animals.
Go back, come, don't worry about any of the laws of physics. Like, you could go in the middle of Jupiter if you wanted.
I think I would maybe go, if I was forced to leave Earth, I would maybe go to Mars, just because I think that would be the next step past the moon. So just so I could kind of see that edge of the future.
Yeah.
And while also seeing Earth from the distance and wishing I was there instead.
It's there.
Yeah.
This is not a real question, but it's did you know in the early 1900s it was considered a scientific fact there were beings on the moon, intelligent beings?
Nice. Yeah.
That's where the word Martian comes from. I just learned that until we sent a satellite by and saw they're not there. So
They didn't wave?
they didn't wave.
They must have been hiding,
unless
I
they're-
think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
unless they're underground.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, that was a fun deal. So, hey, Bosco, one more yet?
Are there any, mission gas areas you wish more startups would help me start coming to you guys and say, yeah, I've got this?
I would say really looking at space as a warfighting domain and not just a domain to provide services for the joint fight. I think that's really important. That's what keeps me up at night. So in space, we've gotten used to having like our big satellites up there and everything's gonna be safe, nothing bad's gonna happen. But it's not the world we live in anymore, right? We have threats constantly. And what I wanna do is I wanna tap in to all the great things coming from other companies and non-traditionals and all these other vendors that can really have this game-changing capability if only SpaceWERX can work with them and work with the right people across the Space Force to make it possible. I think that's really important, and that's something that we've been focused on as a priority and is actually one of our priorities that we have at SpaceWERX. So that's one thing that keeps me up at night and something I've worked on for the better part of like the last 9 years or so is that mission portfolio.
Well, Arthur, thank you so much for sitting down with us, talking through everything you're working on, being here at Fed Supernova, and really putting everything into the mission you have at SpaceWERX. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Austinpreneur. Don't forget to check out capitalfactory.com to learn more about us and join our community. If you have thoughts about the show or ideas on how we can work together, reach out to me directly via email, nickspiller@capitalfactory.com. Shout out to the Capital Factory Dream Team for making this podcast possible, and special thanks to Aaron Handworker, who masterfully recorded and edited the show. Come back next week for a whole new episode.